Especial para mim. Posso dizer que nos últimos longos meses, eu, como um leitor voraz, me deparei com um título que chacoalhou as minhas ideias. Eu procurei na Amazon, não encontrava aqui no Brasil e importei um dos livros mais fascinantes dos últimos tempos, li em espanhol e só recentemente recebi, com muita alegria, com muita honra, a versão em português. É um livro que incomoda, é um livro que toca, é um livro que inquieta, mas, sobretudo, é uma obra necessária para a saúde mental, para a saúde intelectual, para a saúde vital de crianças, adolescentes e de nós adultos. Afinal de contas, de alguma forma, somos todos hoje cidadãos digitais e aprender a viver, conviver, trabalhar e nos relacionarmos de uma maneira saudável com a tecnologia é algo fundamental, inclusive para a nossa felicidade. Então, hoje eu vou ter uma conversa incrível com esse autor e eu espero que você desfrute, aproveite, aprenda e passe adiante os ensinamentos desse gigante pesquisador. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Michel, for the opportunity to have this conversation. I really admire your work. First of all, I have to say I read your book twice. Another day, I published a photo chewing your book because it's a huge work to have a book with almost 100 pages of bibliography and studies. You're so consistent, you go so deep in your arguments that I really have to say I deeply admire your work, and I have to say thank you very much for your contribution.
Well, thanks to you for this nice assessment, because I think it's important to put some reference and do that kind of stuff, because there's always there's a lot of people that have opinion and that tells you think it works like that or works like that. And I thought that one important thing was not to say what I believe or what I might think is correct or not, but go to the literature, because I think that people underestimate the amount of studies that have been done in that domain, in that discipline, and it's really a huge literature that keeps increasing, and I think that it was important to have some sort of synthesis of this literature. But thanks you for your nice assessment of that work.
It's really sincere. And Michel, let's start with this. In your book, you point this, that there is a movement that tries to put some fog in data, in strong and deep information that will help teachers and parents to raise in a better way, in a healthier ways, their siblings. Tell us about this, because the smoke industry and the sugar industry have already used this method of disguising data and confusing the most of the people. Tell us a little about this. How these industries, how do they do? What are their methods to bring us confusion instead of direction?
Well, it's a pretty old strategy. I mean, it was true for any health problem we have to face since smoking. It started with tobacco and smoking. And when you take tobacco, smoking, pesticide, when you take a lot of climate change, so there is what you see is that when money is involved, because it's an industry that is it's billions of dollars. It's a huge industry, and anytime in history when you have a huge industry that is causing some problems on children on health, then you have always the same strategy that have been developed again for tobacco. And we know that because there was a trial in the States where they had to make public their internal report. And so the strategy is, there is a book that is called Merchants of Doubt, and it's really that. First you say it's not true. Come on, this guy's nuts. This guy's crazy. It's not true. And then you start to say, okay, it may be true, but it's not that bad. And then you say, okay, but we don't know, but there are studies that show it's not the case. And then when you cannot go on that track anymore because the study becomes just too strong to be denied, then what you do is you keep finding things like, okay, some type of screens are bad, but you can use string for going to Wikipedia, and you wonderful thing. And you don't say that you don't say that the use of screen is concentrated on some specific recreational stuff. And so you keep just spreading doubt. And one thing is, it's direct or indirect, but there is a lot of examples or case. You mentioned sugar, that is another recent example of manipulation. Is that when you're worth billions of dollars, it's always easy to find some scientists that are happy to help you, but either directly or giving you grant money or paying your students. There is always a waste. But I think the point is, when an industry is worth billions of dollars, then it's rare that the information is really fair and sincere and devoid of that kind of smoke.
Perfect. How did you become so interested in this field? Tell us about your experience in this area, and how was the decision to write this book and to become so deeply involved in this?
I was mad. I think madness is a good reason to write.
Yeah.
No, it really drives me nuts. I work on cerebral plasticity. I work in a department of neurosurgery, pediatric department of neurosurgery, and we have children that have some brain surgery. And one day, 10 years ago, a little more than that, we decided to remove the television and video game console. We decided to remove them from the room of these children after the surgery. And so to do that was difficult because the parents were a little bit puzzled. And so I started to get interested in the literature. We know that these children, and when you have a brain lesion, for example, the more you're active, the more you use your function, the more you go play in the playground and in the playroom around, the better you recover. So we decided that to force recovery in some way, then we would remove all screens from the hospital rooms. And so I started to do the literature to sell the idea, if I may say. It didn't work because the parent, we could convince the parents, but it's always the problem with screens, that we needed people. To replace the screen, we have to have people. We have to have nurses. We have to have educational people. We have to have teachers in that room, and that was difficult. But still, I started to make this literature, and what really makes me angry is that there is such a discrepancy between what you read in the common media, between all these what you just say, between all these advertisements that is supposed to be information, and the reality of what we find in the literature, the scientific literature. That really, it made me angry, and I thought that it's maybe time to I don't know. It's so big, this sort of misinformation, that I doubt that one book will really do much. But at least it did something, and I thought it was important to synthesize that literature. So I start from, let's get out of the screen in the room of the children. But we could not do it.
Thank you for the enlightenment. I felt this anger in your writings, and I made a lot of points in the book, and many comments. I have already written the doubts. I was planning to send you someday by email. That's why I said it's like a dream having the chance to talk with you right now, because I felt, wow, this guy is angry. He's pissed off, and it's important to really stand up for our causes. And so I was very curious to feel, wow, what I felt in his book, is it really in? And it's very important. And congratulations for having the courage to do that. And I have another question. Who had the idea of the cover? Because it's very provocative.
You mean the title?
Idea? It was your idea. Tell us about the cover. It's interesting.
The title or the cover?
Both.
Oh, the title, it was the French editor, because one day I told him I want to do that book, that's my project, and it's really making the children dumb, and that title stayed. And so there was an old book in France that was the La Fabrique du Crétin, the same without digital at the end. So we thought that that title was important to shake. I mean, to shake the tree at some point. And the rest of the cover, that's not me. That's the editor that chose it. And he told me, "Do you think it's okay?" And I say, "Okay, it's pretty fine to me, and it's pretty in the same line as the book was written."
Great, that was very curious about that. And
so editors are smart for finding that kind of stuff. Smarter than I am.
Back to the basics. What is a digital cretin?
Oh my God. Back to the basic is that there is a few things that make us human, and there's a few things that characterize human intelligence and human functioning. And I think when I chose this title, because all that makes us human and that really nourish and nurture our intelligence from the start is really damaged by screen usage. Again, what I want to say is it's important. It's not technophobia. It's not to say you cannot use screen and everything of that should go away. I mean, we are using screens. There is tutorials to learn how to solve, I don't know, differential equations, and you can read the, I don't know, books online. So we're not talking about this. There's obviously positive things about it, but we're not talking about these positive screens that you might do with screens, but we are talking about the things that you really do with screens. And then I forgot your question. I'm sorry, I'm old.
What would you say is the definition of a cretin, digital cretin?
Because the way I use, when you put screens in the hand of children, they don't go for the positive things. They always go, and all the studies show that they always go for what the screens what is the more deleterious about the screens. They don't use it for reading books or consulting tutorials to solve equations. I mean, they use it for entertainment mostly. I mean, Netflix, series, film, video games, and some idle chat and social networks a bit later. And these things, we know that they are damaging all that is making us human and intelligent. I mean, you have an impact of human relationship. I mean, put a screen in the house, and the verbal interaction, for example, between a child and the parents just drops brutally. And then you have some other effect on language, because at the beginning, language depends on verbal interactions. And then after language, that language is the cornerstone of our intelligence and functional and intellectual functioning. If you touch language, I mean, you touch the core of what makes us human. And so when you touch this early interaction, you touch language. And then after you touch reading, that is the core way of getting language behind, I would say, basic level. And there's a huge literature showing that this has very negative effect on language development. Then, although there's this bullshit of video games is good for attention, which is just a very specific type of useless visual attention that, for example, tells you, okay, there's a lot of noise in what I see behind you, and tell me if there is a yellow book, and the guy who plays video game will tell us that in a second, and I will take 1.2 seconds. So it's that kind of attention. But if you take concentration, the ability to focus of cerebral resources on something, then that touch too. So we have language, we have concentration, we have sleep. I mean, sleep is a big victim of screen time. Of course, can come back on that. You have physical activity. I mean, we think physical activity is good for developing the body. That's true. But physical activity, we are discovering right now, and probably know that, it has an important impact on brain maturation. And so you really touch a lot of the cornerstone of our intelligence. And the miracle is that it's not worse than it is right now. So it's not surprised that the children have more and more difficulty, I mean, thinking and functioning.
And it's interesting that you pointed, I think, less than 3% of the time that children use in devices are for discovering new things and creativity. 97% of the time is just doing nothing, and develop this sense of distraction, lack of focus, aggression. It was very interesting to read that even in great networks that shows in YouTube or cartoons, they are teaching students, children and adolescents to become aggressive, lost in their minds, with less memory, with less ability for empathy. Is that makes a person a cretin? A cretin is someone that has a lack of the IQ, the rational intelligence, or a cretin is a person that doesn't have the social emotional ability.
I mean, it's obviously it's a provocative word, but obviously it's both. I mean, IQ and cognitive intelligence is by far doesn't tell anything about what a child is, and yes, there is an impact on emotion, the way of use emotion. There is a huge literature. That's another problem. There's a huge literature on how violent contents make us less empathic. I mean, it's not only something that you observe behaviorally, but it's something that you can record in brain and body activity. I mean, the children that are exposed to a lot of these violent contents, they have a threshold for what they consider, but how the body reacts. Consider its violent contents that is really increased. So we don't only touch the cognitive part, we touch the emotional part. And I will say we also touch there's a pseudo debate, because there is one group or two groups, but one in particular that shows no, there is no effect on well-being and blah blah. And usually when you go, it's often studies that are done in conjunction with the industry. But behind this group, there is a huge literature showing on how screens have an impact of depression, anxiety, well-being, suicide. And what is surprising is not observing that. What would be surprising is not observing that, because just take one input is sleep. I mean, if you touch sleep, I mean, if and there is a huge impact on screen and sleep. I mean, if you decrease the time of sleep and go to an insufficient sleep time, which is the case now depends on the study, but between 70 and 90% of the children, they don't have enough sleep time, especially older than 10 or 12. For teenager is just dramatic, the lack of sleep they have. And if you touch sleep, then you will touch all this emotional stuff. What you have mentioned, you will touch memory, you will touch depression, you will touch anxiety, you will touch well-being, you will touch a lot of emotional stuff. So of course, everything behind cognitive, which I was more interested in, but there is a lot, and there's a chapter on that. There's a lot of things that touch health, and in particular, emotional health.
What would be, according to your studies, what would be your golden rules to have a better relation with devices and screens? 3 or 5 golden rules, like directions you really emphasize. Because in your book, you bring us some directions. It's very interesting because in the last chapter, you bring us some practical tips and directions. Just to have now a brief introduction for those who are watching us, what would be 3 or 5 top rules to have a better relationship with social media, devices, and screens?
I mean, the first rule is use it for what it's good for. I mean, you can use it for the positive things it has. But now if we're speaking about entertainment, I will say the main rule is this: the less, the better. The less you use it, the less time you spend on these things, and the better it is. And beyond this rule is there is a huge literature showing that it's especially damaging on young children. So before 6, if you can avoid, I mean, it doesn't mean that you cannot go see a movie with your kid or your daughter at some point, but before 6, because the damage are more important. The younger the guy, the kid, and the more damage. And the earlier the start, and the more they will use it after. So I will say that one basic rule is it's a period of huge cerebral plasticity, and you have a lot of study that are mentioned that shows that even for small use, like 15 minutes a day, then you start to have damage that you can quantify. Then after, I will say, after 6, if you look at school results again doesn't tell anything about a child, but it tells something about how he's cognitively functioning, how he's emotionally functioning, and social functioning too. If you look at school results, if the content is adapted and if the sleep is preserved, then you can say that up to half an hour a day, you don't have any negative effect. You don't observe negative effect. If you are hyper optimistic and do a very optimistic reading of the literature, let's go to 1 hour. But already 1 hour, you start to see effect. So I will say nothing before 6, not more than 1 hour. Half an hour is ideal, and 1 hour if you cannot after. And then after there is a few I would say obvious good sense rule, like not in the room, because if you put that in the sleeping room of the child, then you have a recipe for a disaster. And there is a huge literature showing that it's especially damaging when you put that kind of stuff in the room. Not in the morning before you go to school or you go to work, because it has an effect on the way you function after. I mean, there is one study that shows that the children, they saw Bob the Sponge for 10 minutes, and you see Bob the Sponge for 10 minutes, and after you do you do some task, cognitive task, you do calculus, you do attention, impulsivity task, and there is a huge degradation after that, just for 10 minutes of Bob the Sponge. So not in the morning, not in the evening before you go to sleep, because it interferes with melatonin. And even if you say, okay, my child can watch a video before he goes to sleep, but he goes at the same time, it will take more time for him to fall asleep. And there is one thing that it's often presented like, wow, they are multitaskers, they can do several things at a time.
Yeah, tell us about that.
That's just pure bullshit. I don't know. That's a fable. I don't know if you call that, but it's really, they are young, but the brain is old, and we're really a monotask brain. Only what the brain can do is one thing at a time. I mean, when you want to do 2 things at a time, then you start the first thing and you stop, and you put the information in your memory somewhere. And then after you start the second thing, and then you have to switch. And so you take what was in the memory, put what you have again in the memory, and you switch between the tasks. In fact, multitasking is switching between tasks. And it has impact, of course, on the error you make, on the time you spend, and it has impact on how you memorize. The more you multitask, the less you memorize. So the child says, I've done my homework. Yes, you have done your homework, but you don't remember anything. Yeah, is that weird? And the brain's like that because attention is really the door to memorization. I mean, if you get something with no attention, you will get no memorization of that in the evening. So multitasking is a problem for that. And multitasking is probably the best way we have invented to rot the attentional system. I want to say it, to degrade, to destroy the attentional system. One of the best things you can do is multitask and teach child very early how to multitask. And there is not only there is a huge literature in human, but there is a huge literature on this effect now in animals, showing that really you destroy the attention system with that kind of constant sensory stimulation, overstimulation, and the brain needs peace. I mean, it needs silence and some temperance. It's not done for being aggressed constantly by sound, by
Wow, that's huge. Brain needs peace. Wow, that's rich. That's rich. Because we see nowadays people interacting, talking, screening, and texting all the time. People are having breakfast with screens, couples at a restaurant exchanging information in Instagram and LinkedIn and WhatsApp. People are in a fuss all the time. So it's really important to hear from you. The brain needs peace. Wow, that's great. I have 2 questions from great experts here from Brazil. One of them is Dr. Cristiano Nabuco. He's one of the greatest psychotherapists here in our country, and he is the director of the Center for Treating the Digital Addiction. I'll show you his question, and I'm very curious about hearing you about that, okay?
Dr. Desmurget, in your opinion, what needs to be done on a large scale to change the situation we are facing with this digital generation? I mean, regarding the lowering of the cognitive functions. And finally, I would like to hear your opinion about the future of these new generations.
Oh my God, that's not an easy question.
We have 3 hours to develop this. I'm just joking. I'm curious about hearing you about that.
I think it all starts. We will agree on that. It all starts with education, and it all starts in the family, in school after, but in the family. And to get a good start, I get that we need a good and fair information. I mean, there is something that's obvious to me is that parents, they love the children. So starting from there, if there is a lot, I'm amazed because it's staggering really, because there is a lot of parents that keeps thinking that television, video games, and some educational programs that have been shown to be a total failure, they're not only a failure but have negative effect. A lot of people keep thinking that it's good for the children. So we need to give people a fair information about what it does. I mean, really, and media have a responsibility in that, because I mean, when you have rotten study that comes out, it's easy to see. So really, we need to parents need to be better informed. Then after, do we need to take some legislative steps? I don't know, but I'm amazed because and it's interesting because lately China, for example, they took some measure to prevent children from playing online video game more than 3 hours a week. I mean, and they cannot play during school days. They only can play in the weekend and during vacation. And 3 hours a week, we are back to the almost half an hour. And I found that the argument was nice because one of the officials said, it's because the children, they are the future of our nation. And I think this is something that Postman did say a long time ago. I mean, the children are the living message that we're sending to the future. And so they are taking this step. Taiwan, to start with Taiwan. And Taiwan is especially interesting because they decided that it was some sort of mistreating children. It was screens were some sort of abuse. And if it's abuse, it's no longer a personal issue or decision. And so they took a law that if you expose, for example, a child 2 years or below to any screen, any type of screen for any reason, then you get a fine. It's probably a little more than $1,500 or something like that. So it's important. And then after, if you overexpose, like they say, which is difficult to express, but the idea is more than for example 30 consecutive minutes, then same, you have a fine. So several countries they are taking measures to start to control this madness.
Very interesting. And regarding the United Kingdom as well, doesn't in your book you said about United Kingdom as well doing this kind of movement.
In the United Kingdom, it was the association of the professor from the secondary education that say if we see child that are exposed to some inappropriate content, I mean that play, for example, very violent video game, then we will take action and we will sue you, which is interesting.
Wow.
But regarding the second part of the question, I should not say I'm pessimistic, but I am. There is something that really did hit me is that we know that there is effect on cognition and intelligence and language. Nobody argued that language is in concentration. Nobody argued on that. And there was this study by the European Commission. They say that's bullshit because for everything that is concrete, for solving the problems, the daily problems we have, they are very good. Oh my God, they're so amazing. And then you look at the the quotation and explain that, okay, school is they're anxious at school. I mean, school is really something difficult. Like, school is like the miserable from Victor Hugo. It seems like something terrible. And so when they're outside of school, they're very smart. And then you look at what were the tasks that help them to say they are very smart. And this task, it's just something that, I mean, I almost cried, honestly. The first task is, I mean, they can set up an MP3 reader. They can buy a train ticket on the internet, and they can do a few things like that, like regulate the climatization when they enter in a room, and when there is an anniversary, they can set up the plan so that people that doesn't appreciate themselves are not close together. And it was so, it really disturbed me, because have you looked at the best, Brave New World, I guess is the title in English, from Huxley? So when you have this cast, when you have the alpha, you have the beta, and you have a cast that is gamma. And the gamma is really some technician. I mean, they execute tasks, they can push buttons. They are not that smart. They cannot think, they push buttons, they buy things. And when you look at that, it's some sort of mix of 1984 for the control, because these guys, they're just giving their personal data to everyone. It's just, I don't know, I'm maybe an old guy, but it's like everybody can know what to do and don't do. So it's very controlled. But then for intelligence, it's like the Brave New World. I mean, there are it's exactly the description that Huxley does from the gamma. I mean, some technician that can push buttons, that can function, that can buy things, that can do very simple things, but that cannot think, that don't have the language, that don't have the ability to be citizens. And I'm afraid that they say that, like, if the European Commission, like, it's fantastic, they can push buttons, but this is not what makes a human being. I'm sorry. We need this guy to be intelligent. We need this guy to have roots. We need this guy to read. We need this guy to know history. I mean, they all know Britney Spears. Okay, that's fine. But I don't know. There was a poll. It's dramatic. There is a third of English children that think that Churchill was a fictional personage, and there is a quarter of American children that think, according to a poll that I saw in a newspaper, that it was a football player. I mean, it's just not. So we are losing the ground that really help us think and function and make a citizen of a nation that, whatever the large nation is, but take care of the polis. I mean, from in the Latin sense, that the city. So yes, I don't like what they're becoming. But it's your fault. I mean, we're guilty for that, and I'm really angry at what we're doing to our children. It's really unfair to do that to our children. We should not do that. I mean, there is no excuse for what we're doing as collectively as adults. I mean, we're rotting the planet with climate change. That's one thing, but we're rotting the brain of our children with all these things. And really, yes, I'm angry. I stop.
Wow, I feel very touched by your words. It's unsustainable. It's very important to point this out, and I really admire your assertiveness. I have a question now from Alessandra Borelli. She's a lawyer, she's an educator, she's a mother, and she's very interested in this field. And she asks you this.
Which actions, in your opinion, schools and families could implement together, concurrently, to meet education to kids and teens? And which are the effective results to be expected to be reached from them?
I mean, the family, and who is the first part? Sorry, I did not.
Families and schools together. Do you believe in this, in a program or a methodology or a campaign to integrate, or there are different roles for schools and for families? What's your opinion?
I mean, one cannot function without the other. I mean, it's families that make the child ready to function in school, and school is in charge of part of the education of the child. So I think this if one part is dysfunctioning, then the child with dysfunction and no one will be happy. So I think, of course, they should work together. This being said, you say media education. Again, there is a lot of positive things about media. I mean, we're using it. I use it all the time. I mean, there is database for my work, so nobody argues with that. And there is more and more use of media and computer and screens in school. And I think that's a problem, because if it's to teach computer science to children, nobody would argue that it's bad. But it's not that. I don't know how it is in Brazil, but you might be able to tell me. But in France, in Europe, in general, in England, in a lot of countries, in the States, it's difficult now to recruit teachers. I mean, in France, there is a shortage of qualified teachers because they cost a lot of money. They need good teacher, but they're worth every penny they cost, I think. And so there is a shortage. And in France, for example, they tell you that the mathematics, which is a more important domain, was removed for the common core curriculum of secondary high school children. And they say it's because the children, they have to choose their path. But that's bullshit. It's because they cannot recruit any sufficiently mathematic teacher anymore, because they go to private, they have better salary, the working conditions are difficult. So I mean that one of the problem at this level is that screens are used to replace human. And you cannot replace human in schools with no cost. I mean, I can hear, we don't have enough human, we don't have enough teacher, so put computer is better than nothing. But it's just better than nothing. I mean, it's better than put the child alone in a drawer. That's okay, but that's it. So this is what we're doing. And I think that it's like home, family, and school is the same. For the child, we need human. And there is another PISA report that clearly explained that the major asset for school is human. It's teacher. It's how they are. It's how qualified they are and how well trained they are. But teachers are expensive, and in a lot of countries we cannot recruit teachers anymore. So I think yes, family and school, they must work together. But I think that the core for them to work together is keep human in the loop and try not to replace human. And the family try not to replace the mom, the babysitter by a screen, and that's cool. I mean, sometimes you can, of course, you have a lot of stuff, not chronically, and that's cool. Don't replace teacher by screens. And if you want to say it, just say it's worse, but we don't have choice, because this PISA, these are international reports that are comparing every 4 years. The PISA clearly showed that the more you invest, the more the countries that it invest, but it's in agreement with a lot of study everywhere in the world, including in France and Brazil and everywhere. The more you invest in it, the more you put digital tools in the schools, and the worse the result of the children, the less they progress. The country that have best result are the country that invest more in humans and the less in that kind of stuff. So it's really a problem. We know that from PISA. And I mean, there was this confinement for the COVID. You had that in Brazil too, isn't it? And so in France, we closed the school. I mean, the school were closed. And after 2 or 3 months, it was such a catastrophe, this distance learning, that the health experts say we need to keep the school closed, because for health, it's important for the propagation of the epidemic. But still, the prime minister came and said it's such a pedagogical disaster, and it increases the social inequality so badly, because the children that are the most affected by that, of course, are the children that are the less socially well. So they reopened the school, and there is an institution that's called the Cour des Comptes. La Cour des Comptes, they are here for controlling public spending. And they issued a report saying that we have spent billions in vain, just for nothing. It has no pedagogical impact. And during the confinement, the learning that was mediated by that was close to zero, not to say zero. And this program, One Laptop a Child?
Yes.
One Laptop a Child.
I read in your book.
So it's a program that they did a lot of Central America country, but they did that in Spain, for example, for underprivileged children. And so you give them tablets. And it costs a huge amount of money. Nightmare, how bad.
In São Paulo as well, they're doing the same. Each
Yes.
student has a tablet. Wow, great.
And the results show that not only doesn't have positive effect, but it has most of this program, they have negative effect. The last one is in Catalonia, in Spain. And so it shows that it has decreased school results in all domains. And if it has decreased school results, it's because the children, they don't use it for what you want them to use it, because they use it for entertainment. And so it really shows that, again, human is the key, and giving them this kind of stuff is not a way to teach.
So comparing reading a book in paper, in printed book, and reading the same information in digital media, what can you say clearly about that?
Because I would say, sorry.
Some parents say, "Oh, a book is expensive. Oh, my children love using the screens. Oh, they like very much to watch videos in my device. So, is a book too hard? Is a book too expensive? What would you say about that?"
I would say, like, my daughter, one day we were in a library, and she came out with a pile of books. And she told me, "I know it's expensive. I know that, but it's not a cost. It's an investment." And I love that sentence, because books are truly an investment. Now, to answer your question, if all a child does on the computer, on the screens, is read books, oh my God, fine. And to answer more clearly your question is, there is a difference. Most of the study and the meta-analysis, I mean the study that are using everything, all the study that are aggregating all the study, they show that there is a little cost in comprehension. You comprehend more, a little bit more. It's not huge, but it's small, it's significant. When you read something in print, in a book, you understand more than when you read something on a screen. And this is even worse, of course, if you have a lot of hyperlinks and things that are popping out everywhere. I'm just talking here about just a plain screen with just the text. You understand more. And what is interesting, for example, is that you understand more, you remember more the chronology in particular. Let's take a book where someone is killed, or two people are killed. And then you have the book, and you remember more the chronology of the events, because I have a book here. The book has I don't know, remember, it's not a size. I mean, it's thick. The book has a thickness, and the brain is constantly recording this implicit without telling us. I mean, it doesn't tell us anything, but here the guy is dead. I mean, here. And here the second guy is dead. So that kind of information is recorded by the brain. And that's another reason why we understand more and remember more what's happening in a book than we do on a tablet. But again, comprehension is not huge. I mean, if a child say, "I want to read books on a tablet," oh my God, give him a tablet. But if he wants a book, it's better. I mean, in addition, it doesn't depend on age. I mean, it's true for very young children, and it's true for adolescents, and it's true for adults. It doesn't depend on how you were bred and how you grew up. I mean, it's a specificity of, apparently, you have a better apprehension of the book. I mean, when it's spatially, it's a page, you have it, so it's easier to understand. So yes, there's a little better for the book and better pleasure. That's another thing that we have in the literature. A little bit more comprehension, more pleasure for most children reading on a book, because it's different. And my God, imagine a society without bookseller, without library. Gee, that would be a nightmare. I think your microphone is off. I don't hear you. Sorry.
Sadly, we are almost running out of time. I'll invite you to give our spectators some direct answers for some questions, common questions of mothers and fathers, like, "Well, I have to work and my daughter keep interrupting me, and if I give her my phone, she remains silent so I can work." What would you suggest this mother to do?
It's a perfect way to turn off a child, is giving that kind of stuff. I think I will answer. The thing is, I mean, of course, you can do this at some point. Everybody is raising the children how they want, so it's not a question of judgment or whatever. But the piece that she will get for a while, she will pay that later. I mean, she will have to pay, but the payment comes later. It comes in a few years, and getting bored is something that is important too. We spoke about peace, but being bored, the brain being at rest. When you are bored, there is this neuroimaging study that showing that when teenagers, students, they are bored. I mean, the brain is really working. I mean, being bored is important for memorization. It's important for problem solving. So when we are bored, then it's like when we sleep. We sleep because the brain needs to work. It needs to do things that it cannot do during the day when we're fully awake and doing a lot of stuff. When we're bored, it's the same. It's like some sort of schematic, but it's not some sort of little sleep for the brain that it can do a lot of things that it cannot do. So let him get bored, damn it. And I have a great solution that I heard from my mom and my father when I was a kid. I said, "Oh, I'm bored. What can I do?" And the answer was, I mean, come with me, we'll do the dishes, or come with me, we'll clean the kitchen. Oh my God, I remember it worked for every children. I mean, they find something to do. So I think it's better getting bored for a child. I mean, giving some things to do, there's one thing, we don't like to get bored. That's one thing. But so there is studies showing that they put some toys in a room with adults and say, oh, either you get bored and you play with the toys. And but if you play with the toys, you get an electrical shock. It will be unpleasant, and at given time you get that shock. I mean, it's more than 3/4 of the adults that take the shock because they don't like to get bored. And so with children, it's the same. If they have access to a TV, a video game player, or whatever, they will use that. Now, if they don't have it, they will get bored for a while, which is good. But then after, they will use what they have. So if they have a DVD player, they will use the DVD player. But if they have books and no DVD player, at some points they will use the book. And if they have some music instrument, like a guitar, violin, and that kind of stuff, they will use that. And there is even one study that it's fine, it's a report, in fact, showing that at some point they get so bored that they will do their homework without you asking if they don't have anything else to do. So the magic is set up the environment so they only have the things you want them to use that they use. But be sure that if a child has the choice between, because we don't like effort either, we don't like get bored, we don't like effort. So there was this study with 500 children. So you gave them the choice of watch a movie or read a book. So they say, oh, I like to read a bit. But when they have to do it, all of them, every 500 of them, they chose the movie. And that's right, because if you have one that chose the book, then send him to the psychiatrist. There's something wrong with that kid. So, but if the movie is not here, then you are left with all the things that might be important and more nourishing. So I think set up the environment and access, I mean, reduce the access they have to these things.
Wow. Dr. Michel, I'm amazed. It's a great pleasure to have this opportunity to hear you answered a lot of questions that parents and mothers and fathers used to have. It's very important to hear from you. I really insist that we all buy this very important, enlightening, and inspiring book. It's very interesting because I understand your work as a mission of really sending a message for our future. For me, your greatest contribution is to making us conscious that the children are the seeds of our future. They're the message, as you say in your book, they are the message we send to our future. And we have the responsibility to raise them wisely. So thank you very much for your contribution. Your work is really gigantic. and I'm honored to have this chance to interview you. I really hope we can talk again soon. Our spectators will have a link to get a sample of your book, and from my editor, it's an Emperor Syndrome that really, really help parents and teachers become aware of the importance of a balanced education in terms of limits, authority, and warmth, kindness, and the balance. It's a wise path to education. So thanks again, and I really hope we have the chance to talk again in the next future. And we'll be expecting your new books that I'll certainly buy and spread them for all the person I know. Okay, thank you very much. Have a lovely day, and it's been a pleasure for me.
Well, it sure has been a shared pleasure, and really, I'm wordless. You know, it's difficult to make me wordless, but I'm wordless. No, thank you, but I think that the two books that you showed, they complements themselves, because I guess equilibrium and it's a sort of, as we say, it's a sort of views of child. I mean, it's a strong word, but I think this idea of equilibrium between niceness and bienveillance. I don't know the word in English, but there should be one. Good care. I don't know how to say it. I'm sorry, but again, thank you very much. It was really a deep pleasure.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thanks to you.
Muito bem, tivemos aqui um momento mágico com o Michel Desmurget, um autor fantástico, com uma obra que é necessária para todo educador, pai, mãe, para todo aquele que, de alguma forma, aceita a responsabilidade perante sua vida e a vida daqueles que educa, convive. Todos hoje estamos imersos a uma cidadania digital. E quanto mais autoconsciência e autorresponsabilidade tivermos, melhor será a construção de uma vida feliz, sustentável e produtiva. No link que você vê aí na sua tela, você tem 30% de desconto hoje e amanhã para aquisição deste livro fenomenal, A Fábrica de Cretinos Digitais, que vai te trazer dicas incríveis sobre como ter um uso consciente e saudável da tecnologia, e também do meu querido A Síndrome do Imperador, Pais Empoderados Educam Melhor, que vai te ajudar a perceber melhor o seu papel como adulto da casa, como aquele que inspira crianças e adolescentes, não a serem os melhores do mundo, mas a buscarem serem os melhores para o mundo. Muito obrigado pela sua atenção e até a próxima.